Okay, so as promised, 11:03. It looks like we have the majority of people have joined us already. So thanks, and we're here today to talk about Collective Pace. That's a partnership we have with Greenworks Lending, and we're going to talk about that. So I'm going to jump right in. I have Tim Olsen with me. Let me just move here. So again, I'm Matt Brennan. I'm the Vice President of Sales at Collective Sun. I have Tim Olsen. He's the Associate Director of Solar and Storage at Greenworks. And I'm going to handle the first few slides here and talk a little bit about Collective Sun. And then Tim will talk about Greenworks. He'll introduce himself, tell you a bit more about Greenworks, and then we'll start really talking about the partnership we have with them. And we're doing projects all over the country with Greenworks, and we'll talk about Collective Pace. So Tim, I'll bring you back in just a little bit here. So again, for the agenda, briefly give you a recap. For those who already know Collective Sun and Greenworks, it'll be a bit of a recap. And for those of you that don't know us, this will be new information, and we're glad to have you on board. We're going to talk about Collective Sun. We have a product called a solar power agreement. A lot of times we call that an SPA for short. And I will tell you a bit about what that is. And for those of you on the call that know it already, it's very similar to a prepaid lease or a prepaid service contract. Tim is then going to talk about CPACE, so commercial PACE, and it's really CPACE 101. How is it they lend money to these projects and what that transaction looks like? And then what is Collective PACE? What are the benefits? And just to give you kind of a preview, Collective PACE is a combination of a CPACE loan and a solar power agreement. We pair those together, and that is Collective PACE. We'll talk a little bit about the qualification process, and then we'll leave some time for Q&A. So a bit about Collective Sun. So we've worked with nonprofits all across the country. We're now approaching about 150 organizations, so the 140th there. We're working in 19 states, and one of the limiting factors for Collective Sun and what we do is whether or not third-party ownership is allowed. Okay, so sometimes you run into issues. For example, in California with Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Los Angeles has its own municipal utility, and they allow leasing, but not power purchase agreements. So a few years back, or a couple of years back, we got approved to work in LEWP. So that's when we go into a new territory, we need to make sure we can operate there, and we'll do all the legwork. So if you're in an area where you're not sure, ask us and we'll find out. And in fact, just real quick here, we just got approved in parts of Florida. So Florida Power and Light, FPL, just gave us a go ahead to work there. So if you're in Florida and listening in on this, and you have projects in Florida in FPL territory, please reach out if you have any nonprofits there. And I use the term nonprofit broadly because I'm referring to all tax exempt entities, whether it's a community of faith, a school, a government, an HOA. Some golf courses are actually structures of nonprofits, as you'll see in a minute. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about what a solar power agreement is, an SPA. For those on the call that are on the webinar that are familiar with prepaid power purchase agreements or prepaid leases, a lot of this will be familiar to you as well. So this is a prepaid service contract, very similar to a prepaid lease. It's a 20-year agreement. So basically when a nonprofit, when they're looking, any tax exempt entities looking at solar, they are, leaving tax credits on the table. So they're looking for someone to monetize those and pass through the benefits. And we do this through our solar power agreement. So I'm gonna take just a standard project. Let's say a nonprofit is looking at a system of, maybe it's a solar system with storage, total cost of $500,000 to make the math fairly easy. Their choices are, to borrow $500,000, or maybe they have cash reserves and buy the system and own it on day one. They can do that. Or they can work with someone like us, work with Collective Sun, and enter into a prepaid service contract. So instead of borrowing $500,000 or using cash reserves for $500,000, they can use an SPA and prepay a lease for 20 years. Now, the cost to prepay the service contract or lease for 20 years is 12% less than the total price, or 88% of the cost. So they save 12%. They prepay that lease for 20 years. Collective Sun owns it, operates it, maintains it. And at the end of the 6th year, ownership transfers back to them. So they get a 12% discount. Now they only need to borrow 88% from Greenworks lending, if that's what they're planning on doing. So they're basically getting a 12% or more tax-like credit on these projects. And I say more, if it's a big project, we will increase the discount. Storage is eligible. So just talk to us about eligible manufacturers, but we like to see storage projects. And again, at the end of the 6th year, ownership transfers back to the tax-exempt entity at no cost. So a quick recap, it's a 20-year agreement. Ownership transfers to the host at the end of the 6th year. The cost to prepay this, to do the solar power agreement or prepay this service contract is 12% less than the total cost. So they're basically getting a 12% coupon. And again, Collective Sun owns, operates it, and maintains the system during that time. And we also have a production guarantee. And we're going to have Q&A at the end. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask anything, and you can always reach out. Now I'd like to introduce Tim Olsen of Greenworks Lending. So Tim, I'd like to stop my video. Yours is on.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Matt. Definitely very excited to be a part of this webinar. We love this partnership that we have with Collective Sun, and I see we've got a lot of people on this webinar, so there's definitely a lot of interest in this product. And like Matt said, we've been doing dozens of these projects together across the country, and it just continues to grow and gain more and more interest every year. So very excited to be joining. Yeah, just reiterating Matt's kind of housekeeping. If you have any questions, I think everybody's pretty familiar with Zoom webinars at this point after a year of COVID, but at the bottom, there is a Q&A button. If you want to just type questions in there, we can keep track of all of them. We'll either try to address them as we go, keep it fairly informal as we can, but we'll definitely make sure to leave plenty of time at the end, go over those questions. If there's any we can't get to, we will send follow-up emails. We have all your emails that you've registered with, so we will follow up and make sure we address all of your questions. And this is also being recorded just so everybody knows, and we'll be following up with more information and links to the recording and things like that. Next slide, Matt. All right, so yeah, like Matt said, thanks for the introduction. My name is Tim Olsen. I oversee the solar and storage work at Greenworks Lending. Greenworks Lending is a commercial PACE finance provider. All we do is commercial PACE, which stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. I'll take a little time to go over exactly what that is and how it works and how our products work together on the next couple of slides, but just a little background. CPACE or PACE was originally started as a way for residential homeowners in California to finance solar and other improvements to their buildings. This concept had a lot of potential to scale, and our founders, who were at the Connecticut Green Bank at the time, were tasked with setting up the first commercial PACE finance program. And so they set up that first successful program in Connecticut, and then saw the potential to grow that nationally, and spun out and started Greenworks Lending just a few years ago. And we are now the largest provider of CPACE financing in the country. We've closed over 400 projects. We're operating in 25 states. Our size and ability to close these loans, we've seen just about everything you can see out there. So we have, best in class underwriting, ability to figure out complex projects, and we've got a lot of different products out there all CPACE varieties, but such as, products such as this partnership that we have, Collective Sun, which helps provide a portion of the tax benefits to nonprofits trying to go solar or use battery storage. Next slide, Matt. So just a little bit more about where we are. So we're headquartered in Connecticut, but we're now operating in 25 states. CPACE is a pretty unique form of financing that has to be passed by state legislation. So every state has their own PACE program, and Greenworks is in basically any area where there is a PACE program. And we have a whole team going around working with jurisdictions, helping them write legislation, get opted in. And so every year we've seen more and more of this map getting filled in. Taking a look at that map on the left, dark green means we're already there closing projects. Almost all of the states that Collective Sun is in overlap here, and a lot of the great solar states, California and New York, most of the mid-Atlantic, East Coast, Texas, all over. So if you're in one of those dark green states, definitely reach out. We can start doing projects together. A lot of the light green ones are also ready to start looking at projects, some of them a little faster than others. So Washington, Nevada, Illinois, these are states where we're already looking at closing projects soon. Some like the Southeast, Georgia to North Carolina are a little slower behind, but regardless of where you are, if you are interested in this product, if it's not there yet, it could be there very soon. And we're constantly growing our geographic footprint. Next slide, Matt. So what is CPACE? Like I said, it stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. This is a relatively new financing mechanism. The key to it is that the state has passed legislation designating certain types of commercial real estate improvements as a public benefit. This allows them to access a type of financing that's been around for public entities for a very long time. So think of a county that needs to do a new sidewalk or build a new fire station or a sewer line. In the past, they've been able to raise debt and then pay back those projects through an involuntary tax assessment that shows up on those properties that are benefiting from that project. So many of you may be familiar with looking at a property tax bill. You have your property tax is based on value, and then there might be a line item for local fire district, sewer, sidewalk, things like that. Basically, what states are doing with this is trying to encourage certain types of commercial real estate improvements and local economic development by allowing private capital to finance private commercial property owners through that mechanism. So if a nonprofit owns a church and wants to put solar on their roof or on their property, they can raise their hand and say, hey, county, I'd like to do that program and finance my improvement on my building. Then they would use Greenworks financing, private capital to fund that project. And rather than a traditional financing product where you're paying directly back to a bank, let's say on monthly installments, you would start getting a line item on your property tax bill for the debt service on that loan. This comes with a number of benefits that I'll dig into a little bit more later, but at a very high level, compared to traditional financing, this allows us to finance 100% of the project cost, both hard and soft. Those project costs vary, or projects that are eligible vary a little bit by state, but in general, every state you can do solar and storage and energy efficiency. So anything that touches the energy of the building, it'd be a new roof, envelope, windows, lighting, HVAC, boilers, chillers, building control systems, anything that can help you lower the energy consumption of your building, we can finance that. And then in many states, we can also finance in water efficiency, seismic retrofits in California, hurricane resiliency in Florida, other things like that, where the state has said, we really want commercial property owners to be able to do this. And one of the unique aspects of almost all of those components is that they are relatively large upfront capital expenditures that help them save money, but save money over a long period of time. So, new insulation and solar, things like that, you have an upfront expense, but you're decreasing your operating expenses over a long period of time, 20, 25, 30 years. So This program was specifically designed to help make those projects make more sense for property owners so that there would be more property owners going solar. And then by combining this with Collective Sun, we're able to specifically target nonprofits by combining PACE financing, which makes sense for solar, and then Collective Sun's SPA solution, which allows them access to a portion of the tax incentives that they otherwise couldn't take advantage of. And like Matt said, nonprofit is a relatively large term. Anyone really who doesn't have a tax appetite can use this program. So even a for-profit entity that, for whatever reason, however they're set up, maybe they fully used up all their tax appetite with other credits, things like that. If they can't access the tax credits, this is a solution for them. I think I'm handing it back to you here, Matt.
Thanks, Tim. And thanks for that. And, this Collective Sun partnership, the CollectivePACE partnership, is again geared towards tax-exempt entities. And as Tim pointed out, Greenworks CPACE loans can be used for lots of different things. But CollectivePACE is really a nice solution for tax-exempt. So what is CollectivePACE? We've talked about it a little bit already, but it is a zero-down option. It solves two problems for tax-exempt entities. One, it helps monetize some of the tax credits, right? It does help monetize the tax credits, just like all third-party ship ownership does. But it also provides the debt required to do these projects. So it's a zero-down option. And it's fairly, as you'll see, it's fairly easy to qualify for. And it's, as you saw on the map, it's growing all across the country. A lot of these nonprofits that we work with, they are looking for a zero-down option. Sometimes they have cash reserves, sometimes they have other options, but this really fills a need in the tax-exempt community, the nonprofit community, where they're looking for a zero-down option. They're looking for projects that's cash flow. That means that they have a 20-year CPACE loan, right? So they have a debt obligation. Every year, twice a year, typically, they're making a payment on that debt. They want that loan payment to be less than how much they're saving on their solar or solar plus storage projects. And most of the time, that's what we see. We're knocking down the installation cost by 12%, and then they're borrowing the balance from Greenworks lending. If you're a contractor or developer on the call, just to be clear, you're getting the 100% of the project cost. 88% is coming from Greenworks, and 12% is coming from us. So again, it's a zero-down option. As a contractor, if you're on the call, you're still obviously getting the 100%, so you're made whole. We'll move to the next slide. Tim, I think I'm handing it back to you.
Yep. Thanks, Matt. So yeah, I think next couple of slides really just going over what are reiterating some of the benefits of this program. And one thing I just want to make sure is clear, PACE is available for any private commercial property. I didn't mention that earlier. We can't do public entities because we can't enforce a tax bill there. So no public schools or police stations or government buildings, but private schools, private hospitals, any privately owned nonprofit entity is able to take advantage of this, as well as for-profit. So PACE is available for all for-profit private commercial properties, including multifamily, so not residential, but 5 units or more of residential would qualify, any standard commercial, and then just not government-owned buildings. And so, yeah, reiterating some of those benefits. So PACE can cover 100% of the project costs. So that's hard and soft costs. If you've got, engineering and, interconnection fees and anything that needs to get built into that, PACE covers all of it, up to certain underwriting thresholds. So we can finance up to 25% of the property value for nonprofit or special use properties, and up to 35% of the property value for standard commercial property types. This collective PACE structure together takes that upfront financing with a fixed rate over a long term and allows entities without the tax appetite to still further decrease their the project cost with that 12% tax-like credit that Matt has been talking about. So like he said, that $500,000 project that a nonprofit is trying to do, rather than coming $500,000 out of pocket or using a bank loan for an unsecured bank loan for 5 years or something like that, which I'll get into in a minute, they can go $0 out of pocket and pay that loan back over 20 or 25 years. So the length of the term depends on the useful life of the equipment. So solar, we're normally looking at 20, 25 years, depending on the state and inverter warranties and things like that. So you're taking that upfront large expenditure, spreading it out over the longest possible term of any financing vehicle. Some of the other benefits I wanted to make sure to mention are, this is looking at the value of their property. So a lot of PPAs and things like that are also $0 out of pocket products. They're looking at whether or not that nonprofit entity is going to keep making monthly PPA payments. That's what they're concerned with. What PACE does is we prepay the solar power agreement with PACE debt, and PACE is paid back through the property taxes. So what we're concerned with is the value of the property. So this allows a sub-investment grade nonprofit off-taker who may not qualify for traditional PPA to unlock the value of their property. So it's a really easy underwriting process. We collect a couple of years of financials. We look at the value of their property and the debt on the property, and a couple other minor documents that we'll collect. So there's no credit score needed. We don't look at their credit. There's no personal or corporate guarantees required as a part of this. And one other benefit I haven't mentioned yet is this payment holiday concept. So because they are paying the loan back through their property taxes, their first payment will not be until their next year's property tax bill. So if we were to close, let's say this spring and the next month or two on a loan, they wouldn't be paying until next year's property tax bill. So that gives time for us to disperse the funds along with Collective Sun directly to a contractor who develops the system. Property owners able to see those energy savings all before they're ever having to make a payment. Versus standard traditional financing, they'd start making monthly payments immediately and have to wait until the system's built and PTO'd before they're starting to see those savings. So we can actually push out that first payment up to 24 months out from when we close. Next slide. Yeah, so this is just reiterating a lot of what I said. So by taking that upfront capital expenditure and spreading it out over 20, 25 years and giving them that 12% tax-like discount, you're taking that $500,000 project, financing $440,000 of it over 25 years at $0 out of your pocket. That gives you the best chance, depends on how expensive the project is and what their rate is, but the best chance of being cash flow positive immediately. So a lot of the projects we do, the property owner is coming $0 out of pocket, and their year one energy savings are higher than their year one PACE payment that shows up on their property tax bill. So they're $0 out of pocket, and suddenly they've turned their roof into a revenue generating asset or an ability to decrease their operating expenses without investing a dime. The flexible and secure, they're, like I said a minute ago, no personal or corporate guarantees. This doesn't use up their borrowing capacity. So a nonprofit who's thinking between some type of borrowing money for expansion or operation expenses or something like that, if they were to take out a bank loan or something like that to pay for this system, that's going to eat up their ability to borrow money. This does not. This is unlocking their property value and doesn't use up the credit with a bank that they can now go to for those other capital expenditures. It also transfers on sale. So a property owner who's not sure what they want to do with their building and takes out a 10-year loan and thinks in year 5, I might want to sell it. Oh no, I'm going to have to pay off the remainder of that loan at that point, and that might be difficult. With PACE, because it's recorded on the property as a tax assessment, it can automatically transfer to the subsequent property owner. So that's this transfers on sale. You know, they can sell it to the next owner. That next owner still has the same panels, the same energy savings, and the same PACE payment that shows up on their property tax bill. They don't have to do that. A PACE loan can be prepaid at any time, and they can do that with a minor prepayment penalty that I'm happy to discuss if anybody's curious about that. And then, like I said, this is easy to qualify for. So if you're a contractor out there trying to work with nonprofits who don't have cash, I think you know they're a difficult time qualifying for other traditional financing for PPAs, things like that, because they're a nonprofit. They're not, large. They're not always, very profitable large businesses, and so it's difficult to find financing. PACE allows us to get around that. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of text on this slide, but just wanted to give an example to kind of make people start thinking about what this could look like. So, we've mentioned a couple of different nonprofit examples. This is one that we did with Collective Sun last year in California. This was a golf course and country club, which, previously when I think about nonprofits, I don't think about country clubs and golf courses, but there are all kinds of tax exempt institutes out there, credit unions and blood banks and, all kinds of businesses that I normally think of a church or a food bank or something like that. So there's a lot of commercial property out there that is tax exempt, including this one. So they were having trouble securing other traditional financing sources. Somebody mentioned the PACE program and CollectivePACE to them. This was a 300 kilowatt rooftop and carport. So they had pretty high energy bills for charging electric golf carts and running their clubhouse and event space and things like that. But we're in California with a tremendous solar resource in the Central Valley, but didn't have the cash and couldn't find traditional financing to do that $700,000 project. We were able to come in, and Collective Sun was able to give a 15% discount at that time. This is back when there was a 30% ITC previously, so it was a little more than a year ago, but we provided 100% of the financing for the remaining 75% or 85%. We were able to do a 25-year term, which was allowed us to spread out their payments so that they were lower than their year one energy savings. So this clubhouse was able to go $0 out of pocket and be $42,000 net positive in year one. They were able to decrease their operating expenses by more than $42,000 more than their first year PACE payment, and able to recognize $3.5 million in savings from this project over 25 years, with $0 of clubhouse country club budget invested in it. Next slide. And this is on Greenworks' website if anybody wants to see a longer case study, but this might be a little difficult for everybody to read, but I'll go through it pretty quickly. And our emails are on the last slide, so reach out if you'd like to see this document in a little more clarity. I'm not sure how big everybody's screens are, but I wanted to do a sample project with some real numbers in front of you all. So this one was just assuming a 225 kilowatt system that costs $500,000 for 123 Main Street in California. So this $500,000 system, Collective Sun would be able to provide that 12% discount. So they would contribute $60,000 in equity. Greenworks would provide the remaining $440,000 in the form of a PACE debt. You've got fees and other estimated costs and things like that I'm happy to talk through, but that results in a $487,000 total loan on that project. We have 14 cents a kilowatt hour savings, 327,000 kilowatt hours. What that results in, as you can see here are the yearly savings. They're able to take what would have been a $500,000 or $440,000 cash investment or bank loan over 5 to 10 years and turn it into a $0 out of pocket cash flow positive scenario for them. So their PACE payment that here in California, they would see every December 10th and April 10th would be half of this red amount. So it'd be, $21,500 or $21,000, let's say, every December 10th and April 10th, but their utility bill savings were projected to be $45,000. So as you can see, by being able to spread it out over 20 years or even 25 would bring this even lower, you're able to turn this into a cash flow positive result. Next slide, Matt. All right, one more slide, kind of helping visualize with numbers. I'm a number person, so this always helps me, comparing those different financing options. So again, that nonprofit approached by solar contractor, 222 kilowatt system at $500,000, considering, okay, what can I do? Should I go cash? That's a lot of money I could be spending on my nonprofit operations, but that's $500,000. The year one energy savings are still the same. It's the same energy system, same solar system on their roof, $45,000, as you can see in all three scenarios. And that's going to take 45,000 times about 10 years to be, well, with an escalator, let's just call that 8-year break-even point. So they're going to have to be willing to come $500,000 out of cash and wait 8 years until they're actually seeing net savings. So in the first 5 years, they're $270,000 out of pocket still. It's pretty hard for a lot of nonprofits to think more than 5 years out to see those savings. A bank loan, like we've talked about, if it's an unsecured UCC loan or something like that, typically you're going to have some type of down payment. So you're going to still have to find some cash to cover the down payment. Here at 15%, that'd be $75,000. You have to pay the remaining $425,000. And typically banks on those types of loans aren't going to go more than 5, maybe up to 10 years. Yes, their interest rate is going to be a bit lower, but again, we'll talk about how the difference is, but you're making a down payment. It's a much shorter term. So at that rate and term, you're looking at $93,000 a year that you're going to have to start making right after you take out that loan. So you're going to start making monthly payments that add up to $93,000 in year one, all before you've built the system largely. And then see $45,000. So you're still negative in that year one, and going to be quite negative for those 5 years until you've paid off the whole loan and then start seeing positive savings. And then coming back to PACE, they are $0, truly $0 out of pocket. With the Collective Sun discount, you're at $440,000 that you're borrowing over 20 years at that 6.2%. Like I showed on the previous slide, you're cash flow positive. That's an infinite return on your investment because you've made no investment and you've decreased your operating expenses. Next slide, Matt. Just one more time, reiterating a couple other points that I haven't mentioned so far. One difference as well through CollectivePACE, it's pretty unique, is that there is an ability for landlords to pass this through. So typically under a triple net lease, you have a tenant who is paying for their electricity consumption and also paying for their property tax allocation. In those situations, there's kind of that disconnect of incentives where the property owner is the one who would need to make the decision to put solar on the roof, but they're not paying the energy bills. So why would they pay $500,000 for that system? Through PACE, they're able to work with their tenant without even having to sign a new lease. They can use that triple net lease as a vehicle to help them decrease their operating expenses through solar and have them pay for it through their property tax payment on the triple net lease. I've said no personal or corporate guarantees. Those are often required for bank loans. No balloon payments. This is truly fixed rate, fixed term, fully amortizing loan. Not always the case in other financing options. The transferability I mentioned, you know, if you were to suddenly get an offer and want to sell your building in year 2 of that bank loan, you're going to have to pay off the remainder at that point before selling and build that in. PACE, you know, a bit easier. You can transfer it with the property. And then, like I mentioned, you know, 6+ months up to 24 or 27 months. Some of it depends on just the property tax cycle in that state and jurisdiction, but a period of time where you're able to build the system before having to make payments on that system. Next slide, Matt. I think this is back to you, Matt.
Hey, Tim, thanks for that. And I think a big takeaway for me with CollectivePACE is that, you know, we're going to talk about the qualification process here, but, you know, it's fairly easy to qualify. It makes zero down options available to really, as long as PACE is available and third-party ownership is available, it makes it, really opens up the world to doing these nonprofits. So it's zero down, it's fairly easy to qualify. And I'm going to talk a bit about the qualification process, and then we're going to leave plenty of time here for Q&A. Now we have a dedicated email address. Of course, you can email myself. My information will be at the end of this, like during Q&A, and Tim's as well. But there's also an email address that gets distributed to both of us, actually, at CollectivePACE@greenworkslending.com. We don't need a whole lot of information really to just give you, to let you know if it qualifies. We want to know the name, the address, the size, and the system cost. Greenworks will do some work to see potentially what size loan this can qualify and can qualify for, and also provide indicative loan terms. So terms and interest rates, and what that monthly payment will look for, will be. So if you're looking at a project, again, you know, it's $500,000. You need to borrow $440,000 with a 12% discount. So saving is $60,000. You know, one thing you're going to want to know is, what are they going to save annually? So we can compare that against what the annual debt obligation is, and to see if it's cash flow positive. So, you know, most of these projects, everybody wants them to be cash flow positive. So if you have just that bit of information, that's really all we need to take a kind of a first look at it. I mean, it's that simple. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for everyone. So as far as qualifying from the contractor standpoint, you know, we do want to see some that the contractor has done some commercial solar work. At a minimum, we like to see 50 kilowatts of solar in the past 12 months, 50 kilowatts each for 3 projects. So 3 projects of 50 kilowatts. That's a better way to say that, in the past 12 months. And we don't have any fees from the Collective Sun standpoint. From your point of view, if you're a nonprofit or a developer or contractor, excuse me, this is just a 12% discount. We don't have another fee on top of that. But we do have some small requirements that I think are in everybody's best interest, you know, for the contractor and the nonprofit. So we ask that we extend the warranties on the inverters to 20 years. I know that, you know, everyone says, hey, look, this is really just a 6-year, Collective Sun just in for 6 years. Why do you require a 20-year agreement, inverter warranty from the manufacturer? A lot of times, you know, from the contractor standpoint, I hear you on that. It's just been a requirement for a long time from the tax equity investors. And it ultimately is a good thing for the nonprofit. So we just build that into the price. So when you quote these projects, please add that in. We like to have a 10-year workmanship warranty. Now we know that doesn't cover everything. This is just basic 10 years of workmanship. That really is the time frame is kind of a legacy from California, where it's almost always been 10 years of workmanship. So if that's you know, a question mark for you from a contractor standpoint, please call me. I'm happy to talk you through it. And we do also have a performance guarantee with our contractors. It's not meant to be punitive. It's really to protect everyone from like a catastrophic, you know, issue, which we've never had. We don't hear about those in the industry, but it is a conservative performance guarantee. So again, call me if you have any questions about that, and we can provide more information. And as you can see, I'm not going to go through line by line here on the insurance requirements, but we have standard insurance requirements that you've probably seen many times. Two that come up often are professional liability insurance for errors and omissions. Most of the time, the structural engineer who stamps these plans has that, and that's good enough for us. And builder's risk. There are different ways to get coverage for builder's risk, and sometimes there's an umbrella policy that covers this. Greenworks actually has a policy that you can be brought in under. So reach out to them for that if it's a collective PACE project. And if anyone's asking what builder's risk is, one of the things it covers is the time frame during construction. If equipment is, let's say, for example, stolen from the job site or vandalized, builder's risk would cover something like that. So everyone, these slides are going to be available for you, so you can go through this and please ask any questions and reach out to us. So I'm going to move ahead here. We've worked with lots of contractors and lots of nonprofits across the country, and CollectivePACE is growing. It's a great zero down option for nonprofits and tax exempt entities as a whole, really category. So if you're working with nonprofits, we'd love to have a shot at earning your business, offering this to them, and so please reach out. We're going to move now to Q&A. I think, Tim, you've been monitoring that. I've had a quick look.
Yeah, so we're getting a lot of questions. And anybody who's looking for where to do that, again, look along the bottom of the Zoom meeting. There's a Q&A button. So please type in your questions. We'll try to get through all of them. We've got a lot, but any we don't get to, we will be following up with emails in the next couple of days, and we'll share all the questions we answer with everybody. Our email addresses are right here, so feel free to follow up directly too if you think of a question for either one of us later. You can also email CollectivePACE@greenworkslending.com. But I'll kind of try and go back and forth, Matt, with questions here. We got a lot. So I think first one would be great for you to answer. Is the guarantee for just 6 years or the full 20 years? Can you extend the time period beyond 20 years?
Okay, so this sounds like it's two. Okay, so 6 years. You said the guarantee for 6 years, Tim?
Yes.
Okay, so we own and operate the system for the entire, for the entire contract, which is 20 years. Now, there's an early option for the nonprofit to own it at the end of the 6th year, and we anticipate folks wanting to do that. If they don't opt for the 6-year zero, such as a zero down buyout, then we charge an administration fee. But yes, if someone wanted to own it, want us to continue owning it past that, we could do that. We charge an administration fee. And Tim, the word guarantee was used in there. Was that referring to the production guarantee? Do you think?
I would believe so. Yes.
Okay. So again, CollectivePACE owns, operates, and maintains the system, and during that time we have a production guarantee. So that production guarantee is paid out at the end of the 6th year.
Great. I'll take the next one. How is the value of the property determined for the 25% for nonprofit and 35% for-profit projects? So just reiterating here for everybody, Greenworks has, and this may answer some other questions, Greenworks has no cap on how much we can finance. So this is private capital. We've got more than enough to do all the projects we want to do. We are limited more on the underwriting requirements, and one of those major ones is maximum loan to value. So we can only lend up to a certain percentage of the value of that property that we're secured by. That is determined through an appraisal of some sort in most situations. There's some where we can rely on the tax assessed value, but Under all of them, if they have an appraisal that was done recently, there's some specific requirements. It needs to be, follow certain FIREA compliance and things like that. But we can use a recent appraisal that states the value of that property. So like a golf course, we would look at the parcels that we're going to be secured by, look at that golf course's value. And on that, we can finance up to 25% of that value. So for that $500,000 total finance project, we would need a $2 million property value to be able to secure 100% of the project cost. The question here says 35% for-profit projects. I wanted to be clear here. So the 35% loan to value is for standard commercial property types. So some of those could even be nonprofits. But that is just non-special use properties. So think office building, retail, light industrial buildings. So you could have a nonprofit that owns an office building that they operate out of, a lobbying group or something like that that's set up as a 501c6 or something like that, and could easily own valuable office space. And we could land up to 35% there. So on any of the projects, we would typically ask for, if you have one that you're interested in seeing what financing looks like, we can pre-screen that with the property address and let you know, yes, it's in a PACE-enabled jurisdiction, it's a property type that we can do, and a guess at how much we could lend, but typically we'll need to get an idea from the property owner. And then if you have some type of proposal on the actual system that you're installing, Energy Toolbase, Helioscope, anything like that, that shows here's the size of the system, here's the year one expected production, and here's the year one expected energy savings, we can run that cash flow that was on that slide that I showed you, where it shows here's your annual PACE debt service, here's the fees, here's the total financed amount, here's all of your savings and things like that, and here's what your year over year cash flow looks like. So a lot of these questions can be a bit case by case, so feel free to reach out to us with projects. I had a good one for you, Matt. As a contractor, how long do you wait for the 12% discount?
That comes in at the end with permission to operate and commissioning of the system. So the first 88% is paid by Greenworks per a standard milestone schedule, and something up front, another 20 or so, 25% at delivery of materials, whatever it is, up to the 88%, and then the last 12% comes at PTO and commissioning.
Yeah, and the Greenworks, that 88% just follows a pretty standard milestone-based draw schedule. So we're looking at when permit applications are submitted, interconnection, equipment ordered, equipment delivered, substantial completion, and then that last milestone is PTO hand in hand with collective funds disbursement. So fairly standard, and happy to send that to anybody who'd like to see details. I think a couple of these I'll just check off because they're ones that we just talked about, but I'll just answer them very quickly. Is the project limited by the existing LTV on the property? So I just talked about how LTV is determined. We can order an as-complete appraisal. So let's say it's worth 3.5 million right now, but we're installing that solar system and they're doing other work and we think it's going to be more valuable. We can order an appraisal that looks at the as-complete value and use that loan to value. And then what are the limits to your financing? Does it cap out at different numbers? Our financing on the Greenworks side, our minimum project threshold is $250,000. That's largely because there are just fixed transactional costs associated with working with the county. They have third-party technical review, things like that. So there are fees with this program that, under at $50,000 with $10,000 in fees, projects don't move forward very often. So we have a minimum of $250,000 and no cap on how large the project can be, other than those underwriting LTV, DTV. So the other two I didn't mention is debt to value. So we can't go more than 90 to 95% of total debt on the property. So that's PACE plus mortgage, can't be more than 95% of that value. And we do have a debt service coverage ratio requirement that we look at. I'm happy to send more details on that, but I will move on. Matt, maybe you and I can both answer this one. What market sectors are the best prospects? Churches, private golf courses, HOAs, etc. I'll let you give your answer and I'll add in too.
Sure. And Tim, I'll just add, there are two different minimums. On the lending side, there's a $250,000 minimum, and Collective Sun has a 50 kilowatt minimum. Obviously, 50 kilowatt systems don't typically cost $250,000. It's just hard to borrow money sometimes, much less than $250,000. But if you do have a project that's smaller, let us know. We can go down to 50 kilowatts.
And sorry, Matt, I just want to add on to that before you move on to the next question. And we can combine non-solar components. So the solar doesn't have to be $250,000. So if you had a 50 kilowatt system with a new roof, with a new HVAC system, all those components can go into one loan, and that loan needs to be $250,000 or more.
Yep. Thanks for adding that. And answer the question, what's the best segment? Our largest category in terms of number of projects is communities of faith. But we see really all tax exempt entities. So we're talking in doing projects for Salvation Army, medical centers, as you saw, golf courses. So it's a big universe. The go-to sort of category is communities of faith, though. So I would encourage you, if you're on the call and you're talking with some, let's have that conversation. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say what determines a good project is less about the type of nonprofit and more about what you're probably used to. What's the electricity offset rate? How expensive is the system? Does it need to be a ground mount system, and is the steel expensive? So I'd say most nonprofits are always still, there are some who are going to make decisions based on desire to cut carbon emissions and things like that, but a lot of them are still going to look at their bottom line and we can't go negative. We need to save money on our electricity bills. So a lot of that just comes down to local solar economics, unless if it's a church versus a golf course, they both have operating expenses and they both want to limit those. So I'd say, some of them are a little faster at making decisions and more used to, have finance committees and things like that than others. But I'd say, what makes a good project is more about the project economics than anything. All right. One question about kind of procedure. Do you have to send the project information to Collective Sun before we send the project proposal to the client? I'll try to answer a bit of that and get your take too, Matt. So I'd say our typical process is, as a contractor, if you're talking to a nonprofit or for-profit about going solar, if normally you're going to want to pitch to them the concept of going solar. And if you have somebody who's interested, you're at that point talking about financing options, and then we can come in and put together a cash flow proposal. If you had that initial call, they said, sure, show me a proposal for a solar system. We're more than happy at that point to send us your basic system information, and we'll put together what a CollectivePACE financing product would look like. And you can then have that next to here's what cash looks like, here's what CollectivePACE looks like, here are your different options. I don't know, Matt, if you feel anybody needs to reach out earlier about requirements or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a really good question. We only have 2 more minutes here, but I'll be pretty quick about this. We're offering a 12% discount. So you don't always need to call us for that, right? When you're talking to nonprofits. Now, if you want to find out, if they qualify, yes, you should contact myself or Tim. And, a lot of our contractors bring us in early in the process if they're not familiar with the product, because they haven't talked to anybody about it before. But over time, as we develop a relationship with contracts, we generally don't hear from them always until projects have advanced a little bit more from the Collective Sun standpoint. But, always feel free to bring us in early or late, however it's best for you. And just, I know we're running out of time, but just to touch on this, as far as, all the relationships here and how the contracts work, you're going to need to see a solar power agreement, this prepaid lease at some point. So we have a standard form you fill out on our website that produces a contract for you, and it's automatically emailed to you. We sign that, and the host signs that. There's an agreement between us and the nonprofit. And if you're a contractor listening to this, then Collective Sun signs an installation contract with you. That's a second contract. The third arrangement is borrowing the money for Greenworks for the 88%. So there are three things happening. There's an solar power agreement between us and the host. Contact me to see that or to generate one. There's also a contract between Collective Sun and the installer, the contractor. That's an installation contract. And there's a third agreement, which is loan documents between Greenworks and the host. Just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and I see we are 1 minute from done. Like I mentioned earlier, we will go through, Matt and I will go through all of these questions. We have, I'd see a couple dozen more that we didn't get to. We'll go through them, type up kind of all the questions and share the answers with everybody so that you're able to see what people were asking and get your questions answered. But Matt, thanks for having me, and thanks for hosting this webinar.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to do this with Greenworks, and it's been a great partner for us, and look forward to hearing from folks on the webinar. We'd like to, years going by fast, so let's get some projects done, signed, and built.
Yep, that's great. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks a lot.